wasn't sure whether to do another recording, another sort of log of today, since I did one this morning, and I just finished recording a sort of post reaction of the series Clickbait, which I'll try and upload at some point as well. So kind of had my sort of tripod set up and everything. So maybe I just thought I'd record a quick follow-up to this morning. So yeah, I ended up getting some groceries. I was able to get outside. It was it was a struggle. I think everything I talking about earlier was kind of going through and happening with me. As I walked there, I tried to remind myself of my words and slow down. And one thing I didn't mention in the logs, but I was trying to do, is just to be present, to be mindful as well, which is almost a bit of an anchor for me, especially when there's a lot of anxiety going on. So I kind of slowly walked to the supermarket, and the real challenging thing was it was quite busy there. So there were some kind of aisleways where, again, this is probably a sensitivity thing, when I didn't, kind of have to try and weave my way through, and I'm sort of overly polite, where I see people just kind of ram themselves through almost and expect people to go out the way, where I try and look for an opening to go through, and if someone trying to go through, I quickly move to the side and say so the busyness was really difficult there to navigate through, and I was at these sort of self-checkouts, and I thought it would be less anxious, like going through there. And usually before it's been okay, but this time the machine kept on sort of malfunctioning. When this is probably a global thing of self-checkouts, when you scan something, put it in your shopping bag, and then it doesn't like the weight or something, and it comes up with assistance is required, and usually the machines there are usually quite good. I've never really had a whole bunch of issues with it, besides stuff from the bakery where that seems to set it off. But when you kind of say how many bakery items you've got in your bag and put it in, but this kind of went off like 2, 3, 4 times, and one of the occasions, one of the staff members, who I guess is part of his duties is to manage that area, sometimes he wasn't around, or he was in, and there's this little office room there. I saw him come out of there a couple of times, and so one of the times when it was happening, I noticed people were queuing up. It was only 3 checkouts that were working. It's a bit more of a smaller grocery store, and I could sort of see people, and part of my vision, I didn't directly look at them, and it just felt even more stressful, because they're probably thinking, what's this guy doing holding up everybody? And I was having sort of unhelpful thoughts about that, and I was trying my best to sort of be efficient in scanning stuff, but also I didn't want to kind of panic and quickly and add more stress. But the people kind of queuing up, and the lady next to me was having issues as well with her checkout, so it was a cross between people quickly queuing up. So it was quite stressful going through that. And on the way out, I thought, maybe it's better if I just go through like a checkout that has where the old school ones, where your stuff gets scanned for you and you bag it at the end, thinking maybe that would be, even though there can be longer lines there, people with big shopping trolleys of groceries, but maybe that would be less stressful for me to do that instead. But saying that has its own stresses, because this would be all about supermarkets, this whole conversation. But sometimes it can feel pressure to bag your groceries really quickly if they're kind of scanning quickly, and the whole thing can feel rushed. so that's its own challenge, I guess. But yeah, and I did regards to the old pizza thing, I did just get both in the end. It just felt easier. I didn't feel as healthy because I've got to sort of think about how that's going to be eaten the next several days. But yeah, I kind of that's just what happened, what I was able to do. And the slices in the bakery, thankfully, are like quite light. They're not like loads of cheese and loads of, like a traditional sort of slice in that way. It's kind of like a light sort of topping, so I'm kind of grateful for that in regards to my health. At least that's something. Yeah, I remember straight after the checkouts, there's a little kind of area by the window to put your bags down, and often I do that to sort through the heavy stuff, and I put the heavy stuff in my rucksack. And I remember when I kind of lifted my grocery bags away from the checkouts and put it down next to the window, there's a little shelf there, and I just took a breath, really, because it was just, okay, I've got that phase done, now I've just got to walk home. But it's just, recovering from the stress of having lots of people just watch you, a queue of people watching you, and that sort of tension of that. And even as I was walking to the grocery, to the supermarket, it's kind of almost like a bit of a phase as well, where I think, okay, I've gotten to the grocery market, put my headphones to transparency mode so I could hear people around me, and then started doing that stuff. On the way home, I was feeling a bit weak, and I was thinking, because I hadn't eaten anything that morning, so not sure how to balance that out, really, because part of me feels like it's still healthy to sort of do an intermittent fast in the morning. Just plug my mic in. I don't know if it's rubbing against my t-shirt. Of course, there's a bit of static sometimes, but intermittent fasting. So yeah, and it probably needs to be a balance of also not making myself unwell physically by not having enough in my system. So that's something just to note. So I think the rest of today, I've just finished watching, as I mentioned, a couple of episodes of Clickbait, and just did a reaction of that. Somehow it was like, I looked at the timer as I was sort of ending it. It's like closing to 40 minutes. I was like, it's just surprising how quick time can go, how much I can talk, I guess. It's a surprise. So the rest of today, I'm going to try and contact my GP about that whole podiatrist situation and try and get a closer appointment and all of that stuff, which may take a bit of energy for me just to write out and be clear on what's going on, so they know the situation in regards to updating my address there. And also I'm trying to figure out how to upload an audio file to YouTube, because I used to, this is for my podcast, I used to like sort of record it on my phone on like a dictaphone app, and then on iMovie there's a way that I figured out just to render it into a movie with like a black screen and then use that. But since I've updated my phone and iMovie needed updating, it's all changed and I can't figure out how to do that anymore. It's just, I don't have the mental energy to kind of research and do that, so I may try and find an easier way. And it may be a case where with the podcast, I record it in video, but just like maybe put my phone on the floor so it's like a black screen, because I'm not sure how I feel about videoing myself for the podcast. It feels easy to do as like a mental health vlog, but with the podcast, because it's kind of almost like a spiritual sort of content, and when I record it, I'm like in a meditative sort of state. I guess I get into a really sort of present state. That's the only way I can record it and talk from that place. And I think with the camera, doing it as a video like this, I'm not sure how that would be, because I'm so used to just the privacy almost of just not having that sort of pressure. And I think a big part of me is just afraid of being judged, because sometimes I can come across in the podcast so centered and clear, and the podcast is just my kind of exploration, my journey in regards to being present, and that sort of spiritual journey. It's not me being a teacher of any kind or any sort of status in that area. I'm just afraid that I'll be judged in that way. It's probably just my thought and perception of that, but I find it hard to separate that when in the vlogs I can be, I don't know if emotional was the right word, but it can be expressive and different to how I would be in the podcast, when it's almost like a meditation session. So I'm sort of talking from a certain energy in a place, and I feel like it maybe the video of that, it wouldn't translate, I wouldn't be able to do that as much. So yeah, I need to figure out that stuff as well, so I can upload that podcast to YouTube as well as the podcast platforms. This is fine because that's all audio. And so Magpie, a lot to say. I think he's probably just on that ledge. Yeah, and he's got a lot to say. So just wanted to kind of follow up on this morning's grocery thing, really, because it was a difficult moment in the morning. I'm still sort of recovering from that. Now I'm just kind of trying to, in some ways, like start my day again in some respects. So I've just finished watching and recording that, and now it's almost kind of another part of the day. It was like that line is grocery and stuff, the line has been drawn underneath that. Now, okay, I've got the afternoon now, and just to kind of almost reset myself and engage in the rest of my afternoon, and not make this morning as much sort of bleed into the rest of the day. So I'm going to try and do that. Maybe I'll try and head out to the park to upload the two sort of reactions for the other channel. So I've got the Awakenings and then just now Clickbait. And maybe I'll see about uploading this as well today. Might be good to do. Maybe it'll be easier for me to get out now since I've been out today already. Perhaps that's one thing I can try and do. So a few things that might be good for tonight. So the GP communication, to write that out, to potentially go to the park to upload this, and I can listen to the podcast, the audio book that I'm listening to, maybe listen to a bit more of that, give myself a break from watching stuff. Then maybe just have like a relaxed evening, maybe start a new show potentially, and again focus on sleep, the importance. I feel like going to bed at the time I did last night, I'm sure it helped a lot. Instead of going to bed like an hour later or half an hour later than my kind of targeted sort of bedtime. So I'm not sure what the time is now. I think it's getting towards late afternoon, so yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, maybe say acknowledge that I'm grateful I was able to record the sort of clickbait reaction, and yeah, maybe I can just give some space to that content, because I'm still not sure where I stand with it. I'm still kind of finding my feet and what I enjoy in it and how I'm sort of doing those reactions. So maybe I can just give that a bit of time to figure itself out. If I continue to do more reactions, maybe over time there'll be a certain adjustment to it, and it will hopefully figure itself out in some ways in the doing of it, and how I want, how I want it to, what I want to talk about in those kinds of things. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, maybe just a note of not overdoing it as well, because that's one thing that can be really easy to do, I find, especially in a mindset where you feel like you've got to do so many things to make it a productive day, or that it's, what I've done today, in some ways that could be enough, just sort of what I had to deal with this morning, and then going out getting groceries, and now I've just recorded this, and I recorded a reaction video before it, which is about 40 minutes, so it's easy to kind of suddenly overdo it in some ways. So just something to be aware of. So I may just take a moment before figuring out what to do next, but I've got a few options there as well, a few things I can try and do. Yeah, so maybe check in tomorrow with my sleep stuff, and also a note about, I'm kind of checking in with the tennis as well. I used to watch a lot of tennis when I was a bit younger, and used to watch like a lot of the Grand Slam matches, and now I don't actually have the channels to watch them, but I've been watching the YouTube highlights on the US Open sort of YouTube channel. So it feels in some way I'm kind of connected or invested in the event, which I'm enjoying a bit. So I'm watching the press conferences and the highlights, and it's nice to kind of be part of this like event. There's like a sort of containment about it as well, these next 2 weeks of seeing what happens with the players and that kind of thing. So that's a positive for me to do, and maybe it's good as well. Maybe the highlights sometimes, even though they're really short, is enough just to get enough of a flavour of what's happened, instead of, I think if I was to watch like a lot of live matches, I think I'd struggle. So I think I was vlogging when I was talking about Wimbledon, where it was really like draining. I think I had to turn some of the matches off because it got too much for me. So maybe it's okay. It's enough for me just to watch the kind of brief YouTube clips and stuff about the tournament. That's enough of it to get what I need from it. So just wanted to mention that as well. Yeah, maybe I'll check in tomorrow and maybe post sleep tonight and see if I'm able to have a build on some of my kind of healthy sleep habits, and see how I feel tomorrow.